This is Blackstone Joe, and you're listening to Slick Talk.
If I say I'm an oil man, you will agree.
There's the stink of oil about him.
Episode 88, let's do this. How you doing? Wait, hold on. Stop what you're doing. I need you to rate, review, and subscribe if you haven't already, especially review. Let us know what you've been thinking about the last few episodes. What was the last episode you listened to? What was your favorite episode? Who do you want to hear next on the show? Is there an analyst who's worked on one of your reports that you'd like to hear from on the episode? Let us know. You can do so when you leave a rating, a review on whatever app you're listening on. All right, so how's the engine? Is it running? You got both headlights still? I don't care what the wallflowers said about making it home on one headlight. You need both of them. Did you renew your license plate? Do that right now, and maybe do your taxes. All right. Today we have Brian on the show. Brian is a senior analyst at Blackstone. I've worked with him for a long time, and it was high time that we had him on Slick Talk. We get into a lot of interesting topics on this show, not just data related, though of course we do have a data specific portion for the listeners. But we talk about Brian and what led him to Blackstone, his experiences beforehand, what led to him becoming a senior analyst, and I think it was a very interesting talk. Let me know what you think. This is Brian joining me on Slick Talk. Brian, thanks for joining me.
Happy to be here, Joe. Thanks for having me on.
So you're a senior analyst. That is going to be in the episode description, by the way. I'm putting your credentials there. But also, you're the 2023 Blackstone Bracket Champion.
Indeed, I am.
I'm going to grill you a little bit here. How much college basketball do you watch?
Close to zero. Very close to zero. Yeah.
God, I'm in pain already.
I'm a casual fan at best.
So you were the bracket pool champion. What was your analysis, if you will, into your picks? Are you a mascot guy? Are you a team colors guy? Are you a this mascot sounds more intimidating than its opponent, ergo?
Yeah. There's no real rhyme or reason to the picks I made. I wish I could say there was, but yeah, I mean, it was one part looking at, what the experts had to say about it, but not very much. I just didn't spend that much time on it. It was one part going what I knew of the past history of these teams, their legacy, how big their names were, and then part of it was the numbers next to the teams. I had the bright idea that the higher number was more likely to win. That was not the case this year.
I'm in so much pain. So, and I know this is how it goes. I care entirely too much about college basketball. So, naturally, I've poured over the tape. I have read the breakdowns, the statistical breakdowns. Also, I've detailed the matchups to the point where I'm taking into account which team had their conference tournament on which date, resulting in how much rest before the round of 64 and how that might play into regions. And also, this site has statistically awful three-point shooting because of the way, some arenas just traditionally have poor performance in those areas. But therefore, I knew I wasn't going to win because that's not how these things work.
I was going to ask, how'd that work out for you?
I can't quit it. But this year, though, I did go for what I want to see happen. more than what I necessarily expected. So I did my analysis, and then I kind of sandwiched that together with just my emotions, which is obviously not what we do when we're looking at an oil report. We're kind of supposed to leave our emotions out of it. But I had to pick your brain and just see what direction you were going, as you are the champion. Is that your first win?
It is, yes. I've been very close to the bottom of the table in past years. So I'm excited to come up with the win. Not really proud of the way it was done. It was a pretty low score, if I'm being honest. But hey, a W is a W.
Indeed. So, welcoming you onto the pod, I just had to ask if you had listened to a previous episode, particularly the Paul Blart incident. Have you listened to that episode where I unpacked my trauma?
I have not, no.
So, for people that don't know, I got a Paul Blart DVD mailed to me. And also, it was Paul Blart 2. It wasn't even the courtesy of sending me the first one. Like, they think that I already owned the first one. Actually, they didn't think that. It was a joke, and I understand that. I understood it then, but I wanted to milk the content for what it was. So I get the DVD sent along, and then I'm naturally just going all around the office being like, hey, look, someone sent me a DVD, not realizing I was opening myself up to further attacks down the road.
Indeed you were, because I saw an opportunity.
I did a dramatic cold open where I was like, your analyst, your source, your host is under assault. And then, Brian, you decided to piggyback on this. And what all did you send me in terms of Paul Blart paraphernalia?
If I remember right, it was a bunch of stickers of Kevin James' face.
Large, very large stickers. I'll include photos on the Instagram post for this episode if y'all want to know what I'm talking about.
And a very large T-shirt or tank top.
Very large. Slightly insulted by that.
What was it, 4 or 5X?
4 or 5X. Yes, indeed. It was one of those sizes. That was very funny, though.
I had a good time with it, yeah.
So the Paul Blart episode, check it out. Also, listeners, if you haven't heard it, if you just want to see me sound incredibly worried and like Doomsday Prepper type of tone, that's what I was aiming for. I love watching Doomsday Preppers, so that was what I was going for. But Brian, more about you. Blackstone is located in Fort Wayne. Are you from Fort Wayne originally?
I am not. I am originally from Syracuse, New York. I have very few memories of that place, though. Really just snow.
Just born there?
Yeah. When I was about 5, parents up and moved to Indianapolis, Pike Township.
What, do you know why they moved to Indianapolis?
Yeah, my dad wanted a new job with the same company. Pretty boring reason to move, but that's what brought us there. And then from there, he transferred to another role that was in Fort Wayne. So I moved here right before I started high school up at Carroll on the northwest side of town.
Who was your dad working with?
The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
So
more commonly known as the Mormons.
Necessarily, yeah, that necessitates some travel. So how old so you said you were around high school age when you were...
Yeah, just before I started high school.
Okay, so like, were you in a mindset of what the heck is Fort Wayne and what goes on there? Or...
Yeah, I wasn't really aware of it as a city.
Yeah.
Before I moved here.
I don't know. So when I have to describe Fort Wayne to people, I just say it's 2 hours away from Indianapolis, and it's the second biggest city. I don't know what else. I don't know how else to talk about it in a way where people think that Fort Wayne's not like a one-stop light town with nothing else. Like people, that's generally what the outsider thinks.
Yeah,
I believe.
I think our claim to fame is the best minor league baseball park in the country.
Absolutely, that ballpark rips. By the way.
Oh yeah,
that's an incredibly nice ballpark. I went to Guaranteed Rate in Chicago because I was there for reasons and I wanted something to do, and the Sox had a game and I'm not a Sox fan. I was just like, I'll check out the ballpark because I want to go to more ballparks.
Sure.
Hot take on this pod is that the Tin Caps ballpark is nicer than where the Sox play even. So anyway,
I really have nothing to compare it to, but yeah, I like taking in Tin Caps games there. Good venue.
Do you also go to the Comets? Do you enjoy minor league sports in Fort Wayne to the fullest?
I do. I've been to a Comets game here and there.
Because I've heard the Comets games are a great time. I'm just not a hockey guy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We'll pack the Coliseum. It's great.
I think my wife is happy I'm not a hockey guy because she already has to put up with college basketball, light college football, intense NFL, intense NBA once the playoffs roll around, and baseball. So if I just came home one day and was like, I'm into hockey now, that might be the straw, the proverbial straw. But we spend a lot of time talking about cars around here. Did you ever think you'd be a car guy, or was Blackstone?
Honestly, no. I learned how to do oil changes as a teenager, but that's about the extent of what I could do. Changing spark plugs and changing oil, and that's really as deep as I thought I'd ever get into it.
So when you first started doing maintenance of your own, were you a 3,000-mile oil change guy? Were you like what guided your decisions maintenance-wise?
It was definitely mileage-based, but I was a little more relaxed about it than 3,000, more of a 5,000 to 10,000 guy.
And was that across the board, whatever you owned?
Yeah.
And what was your first car?
My first car was, the first car I drove was a Geo Prism, and the first car I purchased was a Ford Explorer.
Nice, actually. That's pretty good for the first purchase, I think.
Yeah, it was an older one. It was probably 2010, and it was a 1997. It did have a new transmission in it, an Allison 1000. And at the time, I didn't really know what that meant, but I liked new.
Yeah, props to you for knowing, because a lot of people don't know what their transmissions are. And the fact you remember what the first one was, that's cool. So 5,000 miles or so on the oil changes, but were you conscious of the oil you were putting in, or was it just price point purely?
Okay, yeah, so I learned how to change the oil. I didn't do it regularly. I usually took it into a Jiffy Lube or whatnot. Quick oil change place, and whatever they put in there, didn't really ask any questions.
Yeah. So now when you are going about your oil changes, what is the perspective as far as interval, oil type? What are we looking at in terms of how you decide that?
Funnily enough, it hasn't changed much. Though instead of using mileage as my guide, I rely on the oil reports as well. To kind of guide that decision making. Though I don't sample as often as I should. We recommend our customers go 2,000 and then check back. I should do that. I do not. And my last oil change, I pushed it too far because I got overconfident.
Yeah, let's just jump to that then. I remember looking at the report. Okay, here we go. I have it in my notes. It looks like you took the Civic out to 17,000 miles.
Indeed, I did.
On the oil. Needless to say, is that something you would ever have considered before Blackstone?
No way.
It doesn't surprise. So let's look at the report a little bit. Can you pull up the latest report? And for the listeners, we're going to have this on our Instagram if you want to follow the data
great.
along.
Gonna call me out like that?
It's fine. The engine's running. It's running well, right? You don't have any issues?
Well enough, yeah.
All right, well, let's just go with the numbers.
Okay,
so unit ID Icarus. I know that wasn't your chosen ID. That was modified for you.
It was given to me after seeing this data. Yeah.
So looking at the numbers though, this doesn't look bad at all, Brian. It looks like you have an iron level that is a bit on the high side. But what's on a per mile basis? What are we looking at?
Well, we're looking at about
a little more than twice average, yeah.
Yeah, and about 3 times as high as it was 8,000 miles before then. So that's not great.
So this does look like an example, though. We talk a lot in reports about how running the oil long enough as metal accumulates, it's not going to be able to lubricate as well. It's going to, the metal accumulation is not going to be a good thing. It looks like maybe this was an instance where the oil was losing some lubricity due to how much iron is picking up, maybe?
Could be. I think the silicon probably has more to do with it.
Silicon, too. So you have this high silicon level. Did you find any sort of issue with the air filtration setup that might be allowing dirt?
Funnily enough, during this interval, I ran off the road in southern Indiana on my way to Bloomington and ran over a sign that said, "Warning, the road curves," which was pretty ironic.
Sign was in a good spot then.
Yeah, yeah. Tires pretty low, taking it a little too fast, slick road, all added up to me running off. And that sign I hit punctured the air intake tubing. And it was upstream of the filter, like before it goes to the filter.
Wow.
But it
okay.
also knocked a hose loose that goes from the air filter box to the intake manifold. So there's a loose fitting there. And, I stuck it right back in. But, I'm seeing silicon there, so chances are good something got in that brief time it was off.
Yeah. So then maybe stands to reason that if that silicon clears up and the iron level drops as a result, I mean, you might be able to attempt another pretty ambitious interval and not wind up with that amount of metal.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to, check in on it before I go all the way to 17 again.
Yeah.
I'm actually about to do for one now.
Yeah.
As a sample. I've gotten another 7,000 miles on this oil since then. So curious to see, if it really was just a one-time thing or if this is something more to look into.
Yeah, no, keep me posted on that. That's really interesting. But these Hondas in general, I have to say, not just like the 1.8s, but most of them in general, if I'm sitting down to write reports for the day and I see a Honda sample come up, that's generally a good thing. Like Hondas and Toyotas, I think, are like the most fun because this may not make sense to some listeners, but they're the most fun because there's the least going on. I think. When you sit down and you pull up the data for the day, is there something you're hoping to see as far as an engine type? Are there some engines that you see them and you're like, chances are good this is going to be an ugly set of results?
Oh, good question. I don't really want to slander any of the manufacturers, so I'll go with with one that I like to see, and that's probably the Toyota 1GRFE.
1GRFE, yeah,
that's
easy.
I mean, 99 out of 100 of them really give me space to really put myself into the comment box because there aren't a laundry list of issues to cram in there.
Right. I think sometimes common concerns can really run rampant too, even in some engines. Like for all the concern about bearing problems in BMWs,
it's almost like you have to address it no matter what it looks like, because chances are good that's what they're going to be interested in.
Right. And the thing is, though, I don't see a ton that look like an obvious bearing problem. Basically, I think sometimes the concern can outweigh reality.
I certainly agree.
They are susceptible, no doubt. That's a thing, but I think people would be surprised to learn just how many of these look like they're doing pretty darn well, and they'll see maybe a slightly high copper level. That's got to be the most frustrating thing, by the way. I don't know what you think about this, but reporting a slightly high copper level in an M3, everything else looks good, and then the first response will be, "Well, time to change the bearings." Do you ever get that?
Oh yeah, I do.
And what's your approach there when the concern is immediate and truthfully?
Yeah, so my approach is, hey, you want to change your rod bearings? Go ahead. That can be an issue. So getting out in front of it, makes a whole lot of sense. At the same time, I wouldn't use this report as a reason that they need to be changed.
Yeah. Because if you have a slightly high copper level, the engine runs fine. Lead and tin are fine. Because if it's to the point where the leaded layer is worn through, and then that's why we're not seeing a lot of lead, I'd have to believe you'd be having some operational issue, right?
Or even if you're not, then probably more copper than just a slightly out of the average range.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because it's got more than one source. And if the engine's doing fine, I have a hard time kind of agreeing with that caution. But yeah, the common concern is something we run into and we have to deal with. What's your thought on customers saying, everything looks good. I want to try a different oil. I want to try something different than the manufacturer recommends. Because that one always kind of stumps me sometimes in the sense that I would never assume that I know more than the people who designed the motor.
Yeah.
Do you kind of take the approach of feel free to experiment? Or because often I feel like, well, this is your investment. This is your motor. This is your money if you want to play around. But what's your thought when someone wants to stray from the manufacturer recommendation?
Yeah, I don't go quite as far as saying, yeah, feel free, go for it. By all means, should be great. It's more of well, I mean, it's up to you. You can try it out and then sample back, see how it performs.
Mm-hmm.
Not going so far as to recommend it, but not saying to avoid it either.
Yeah. That's my thought too, because truth be told, it's probably going to be okay if you're talking about like someone who wants to go from a 540 to a 1540. It's probably going to be fine.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, it's more so when people want to,
or even from a 530 to a 540.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, that's probably going to be fine.
When they want to make that big swing.
Right. Or something where the manufacturer strictly says 0W20. That's all you should put in there, and they're thinking maybe a 5W40.
Mm-hmm.
That's a little big.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like I rest easy knowing people that have put the thousands and thousands of man hours into research and development and design, and I think that's a great thing. And I'm excited that there are people who have put in that work, so I don't have to.
Yeah. And that's a line I've typed a lot of times in emails is the manufacturer should know this engine better than anybody.
Yeah.
So what they recommend is probably what's best.
Problems do crop up, which is why we have our service to look for them. But yeah, I think sometimes you can get lost in the weeds. As a careful owner too, and I think a lot of it comes out of genuine care and concern. But I would just want to reassure people,
especially with people that are sending samples in for analysis.
Yeah,
like that's pretty top level when it comes to engine care.
Certainly.
So I assume that most of our customers, have done a lot of research into what's best for their engine and what they can do to keep it lasting for as long as they can.
I want to talk about your bio a little bit because on the Blackstone website, your bio picture is you with a machete in a field with a straw hat.
Yes.
Can we unpack that a little bit? What's going on in that photo?
Yeah. So that was me in a straw hat, wielding a machete.
Was this taken during a time of recreation?
It was, yes. I was not a man at work. I just wanted to look like one. That field is actually in Michoacan in Mexico.
Okay.
Where I was visiting the family of a friend. She wanted me to marry her sister, who was there, so that she could get U.S. citizenship eventually.
So how long have you been married?
0 years.
Okay, so that's still coming.
There was a bit of a misunderstanding, maybe lost in translation. My Spanish is not good, but yeah, she wasn't.
Do you speak some?
I do speak some. Yeah.
Okay.
That trip would have been very hard if I didn't have any, because Michoacan, that's not usually where tourists go.
No.
That's more of a cartel area.
So how long were you there?
I was there for about a week.
Okay. So like during this period, did you know like right from the jump what the situation was? That like you're about to be in a arranged marriage if you don't get out of there?
No, I didn't really understand the situation well. But it was a whole lot of fun. And yeah, ended up not marrying this girl. She was very nice, but also deeply religious. And if she was going to get married, it was going to be, legitimate.
Yeah.
And it just didn't really click. Didn't have that spark.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it was hard to communicate since my Spanish is not very good and her English is not very good. But yeah, fun trip.
I mean, all things considered, Michoacan, still a lovely place.
Oh, lovely place. Yeah. A lot of the avocados in Mexico, Michoacan. big avocado country.
Okay, at first I thought you were gonna say the avocados there were like unique for some particular reason, but like that's what I'm getting at Kroger is the Michoacan avocado.
Probably. And that's why
awesome.
we get the ones from there, is because of the best avocados in the world.
Yeah. What a trip. See, I knew there was a story behind that photo.
There is
Something
indeed a
more
story.
in depth. That's awesome. I mean, if things had worked out, then we probably wouldn't have had you at Blackstone. You never know if you would have made it your way into the oil analysis world.
Probably not. I might not have moved back to Fort Wayne had I married that woman.
Man,
Yeah.
that's fascinating. So I saw that you got your bachelor's in psych.
I did, yeah.
So I barely made it through Psych 101. You ended up getting a degree. So was Psych your choice going in, or was that something you kind of found along the way when you were in school and you were like, this will be
Yeah, so I
degree?
started that degree when I was about 25, and at that point in life, I'd really had it pinpointed. This is what I want to do. I had the idea of going on to get a master's in counseling and being a mental health counselor. Now, before I was 25, there were a lot of other things that I had in mind as to what to do. So it's not like, yeah, from a young age, I wanted to be a counselor. It took me a long way to kind of find that, and obviously I'm not now a counselor, so that's since shifted too.
Wow. So before you were in school, though, I know you were in the Marines.
That's right, yeah.
So how long was that?
Oh, about 3-4 years.
Okay.
Yeah. So coming out of high school, I got a scholarship for my French horn playing.
Yes.
And went to Despain University for about a semester and a half. The 2008-2009 recession happened. Lots of housing market collapse, a lot of people losing jobs. You also had, not a lot of people think about this, but symphonies folding left and right.
Yeah.
And
Not a
so-
good market for French horn.
No, not a good market for French horn. So my prospects in that were looking pretty bleak.
Yeah.
Because there'd be all these seasoned professionals from these smaller orchestras competing for every job that was left. And so I didn't really feel confident throwing my ring in that hat. I also wasn't doing very well in school, so I just quit that and up and joined the Marine Corps.
So that's a massive leap. So did you know like people who are in the Marines or serving otherwise? Like what was the gateway into being like the Marines as opposed to National Guard or Army, or like how did you make that particular choice?
Sure. So I'd actually already auditioned for their band program. It was like a kind of plan Z if I didn't get a scholarship for college. It's like I can join this military band. So yeah, that was already floating in my head. I also had a cousin who was in the Army Special Forces, and some other family members that were servicemen. So
Okay. So it wasn't otherworldly exactly. It was, you had some sort of feel for what that might be like.
Right.
Yeah.
But there's no really preparing for boot camp. I mean, it's just a whole nother reality, and there's just no way to prepare yourself for that experience. You're just thrown in, and you either sink or swim.
How long is boot camp for Marines?
3 months.
3 months.
Yep.
Was
and,
there?
and every day is like if you've seen what's that Kubrick movie with R. Lee
Full
Ermey?
Metal Jacket.
Full Metal Jacket. That's the one.
Is that pretty accurate to what the vibe was?
Surprisingly, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot like that movie, except there's 3 or 4 R. Lee Ermeys instead of 1.
Is
for
there any
every platoon?
Is there any depiction of Marine life in like movies or TV shows that you remember seeing and being like, this is so wrong or not at all realistic?
Nothing that really stands out. No.
Yeah.
Sorry, got nothing there.
Oh no, that's cool. Yeah, I just remember watching Jarhead when I was growing up, watching Full Metal Jacket, any military movie, and always wondering in the back of my head, are there people who are watching this that just like hate this right now because of how it was depicted?
Oh, I did just come up with something. There's a sci-fi series, The Expanse, and the second season, or maybe third, really revolves around like a mission gone wrong with the fire team of Space Marines.
Yeah.
And there's 4 of them on some rocky planet, maybe Mars or the moon or something, I don't remember where. But they get blown up, and it shows the scene of them getting blown up kind of over and over again, but they're just standing in the open.
Yeah.
Clustered in a bunch.
As one would do. Yeah.
It drives me crazy. I couldn't continue watching that show because it drove me so crazy. It's like, this is not how you operate.
Yeah. So do you think your psych degree, your previous training experience in various other environments, Marines notwithstanding, but especially the psych degree, do you think that helped prepare you for the barrage of mental attack that is proofing during the early years, and just the scrutiny that that I think a lot of people at home may not know? So like when we write reports, it is not merely the whim of one analyst. We go through a review process, a proofing process, where one analyst checks another analyst, and it's carefully reviewed. So that scrutiny, I think, can definitely be a little tough to navigate early on. But do you think you perhaps had some good perspective on how to handle the trials and tribulations of the training process?
Yeah, I think that's where my Marine Corps experience really helped me. Because, if you can take a drill instructor telling you your family doesn't love you and you're into your face, then you can handle pretty much anything.
My God.
It's just hard to get flustered.
It's so personal.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'll go there.
That's wild. So going back to that, though, you were in Hawaii, right?
That's right, yeah.
For a fair amount of time?
Yep. So I did that basic training, combat training, and then 6 months of dedicated musician school. From there, I got lucky enough to get assigned to the band in Hawaii. And yeah, that was pretty great.
Was musician school pretty intimidating compared to what you'd already gone through?
No, it was a lot easier. Since I'd already been to, it was like a conservatory style program that I was in, like where I was locked in a practice room for 4 hours a day.
Yeah,
doing orchestras and stuff. And so,
do you listen to French horn and orchestra while you write?
Sometimes, yeah. I listen to all kinds of this stuff, but
I'm more and more I have to stray from anything with lyrics. So
yeah.
My co-producer is going to laugh when he hears this, but are you familiar with the movie Tar starring Cate Blanchett?
I am not.
So she's an orchestra conductor, and I went from listening to that soundtrack to just like diving into classical while I report write, because
great.
There's no lyrics to distract me, so I'm able to do that. So
and there's some really good music.
I figured that you might be going down that path when you're writing. So do you prefer?
Sure, I drink from that well from time to time.
What's your preferred mode when you report writing? Do you want to have music playing most of the time, or are you like, sometimes I want the sounds of silence?
Really depends on the day or just the time. I definitely listen to classical music from time to time. Also listen to other kinds of music, the occasional podcast, sometimes silence.
I find it really
depends.
What dictates it to me is what I'm writing about. So if it is a series of reports where it's heavy on special testing and more so reporting things without necessarily too much in the way of commentary, then I can listen to anything. If I need to be really carefully sifting through certain results, then not even a podcast. It's just got to be very kind of empty space to focus on. But
yeah, and when I listen to podcasts, it's not like I've got Dan Carlin coming in. I just can't.
Yeah.
I can't attend to that and report writing simultaneously. Mm-hmm. It'll be something more inane, like last podcast on the left, or a hot dog is a sandwich. Something
all
really
good stuff. Yeah,
that doesn't take much brain power, and it's just more listening to people talk.
Okay, so now we're going to dive into some data, what many listeners have perhaps been waiting for. Since we have two senior analysts on this show, it's high time that we actually break down some report data. So, Brian, I asked you to gather up some examples here. We're going to talk first about an aircraft sample, but this isn't a aircraft engine type I think we've broken down before. So take us through your first example. What are we going to be looking at today?
Yeah, we're going to be looking at Austro diesel engines. There aren't too many aircraft that use diesel engines. Just for years and years and years, these small planes have depended on the opposed gasoline engines. And these ones are diesels instead, and they're liquid cooled.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much you take what's in like a Volkswagen car that's got a diesel engine and put it in the plane. That's essentially what it is.
Nice thing is, they don't make a lot of metal. They tend to wear very well.
And pretty consistently.
Yeah.
Like it's got a very distinct wear profile that you don't see variations from very much.
And it's, they're not short intervals either. They're usually like 100 hours or so, right?
Right. However, a few months ago, the manufacturer of them put out the service bulletin where evidently there were a series of serial numbers where the pistons that were installed might not have fit quite right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like every one of these has this problem. I'm not sure if I've even seen a sign of it yet. But they put out this service bulletin, very clearly stated if aluminum reads 8 parts per million or higher, tear down the engine, replace all the pistons and piston assemblies, new rings, the whole shebang.
Yep.
And that's something we don't hear about very often, or don't get instructions about very often. So I thought that was pretty interesting that they pinpointed aluminum in oil analysis as a sign of a serious problem. And so that's cool that we can help people, get ahead of that.
Yeah, no doubt. Looking at those is also interesting because it's, like you said, most aircraft we look at, vast majority of them are going to be running leaded fuel as well. And the nice thing is with those Austro diesels, there is the absence of lead, and therefore knowing that if lead does show up and it's not related to fuel.
Well, interestingly enough, sometimes we will see samples from them with 50, maybe 100 parts per million lead.
It's got to be sample contamination, right?
Right, it's got to be. Maybe using the same hose that was used to sample from a gas airplane engine, or maybe from a drain pan that was previously used for oil changes from those gas engines. So you've got, a little stray lead from that.
Yeah. And it's something that it almost always looks so weird that it has to be out of place.
Right.
There'll be a trend where everything's clean, then you see this random spike in lead and nothing.
And it
else
won't
is
come
wrong.
along with like copper or tin or iron or anything else.
The
Everything
hallmarks.
else looks the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But that's, going back to what we were talking about earlier, engines that we'd like to see. If I pull up an Austro diesel, chances are good it's going to be a very quiet set of results.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now I want to look at one of the particular reports you brought with you today. It's like this one came out of a 5.7 Hemi. So what was the story on this one?
Customer followed up with me in an email and told me that he was concerned about the lifters and the camshafts. He'd heard that they were a trouble spot for these engines, and I'm sure you can testify that is something we hear about.
Oh, yeah.
Hear about quite a bit. And so seeing this report really gave him some peace of mind.
Yeah.
Because the cam lobes, the lifters they wear against, both steel. They'll leave iron in the oil, along with several other steel parts. But if iron's reading high and nothing else is, that's a pretty telltale sign that you got some cam lifter wear going on. And, he saw that this iron level was really close to average, and so he could be pretty sure that wasn't a problem for him. And, this isn't really a rare occurrence, but that's probably what we do more often than anything else is give people peace of mind.
Yeah.
That these common failures that they've heard about aren't a problem for them.
Yeah. Because truth be told, I mean, you can tell someone that the engine sounds fine, that, it doesn't have any apparent issues while I'm driving it. But without actually looking at the used oil, you have no way of knowing for sure exactly how much metal it's making. So, yeah, that's a good example of using analysis for peace of mind. Here, I want to dive into a situation where you're able to help a customer find and correct a problem we didn't know about beforehand. So first up, it looks like we have a sample from a BMW S54. So Brian, what was the story on this one?
Yeah, so this one we had, good reliable trends from a few years past. Had high iron in one, but it went back down nicely, and then it shoots up along with copper and aluminum, and that's a pretty strong sign that something isn't wearing like it should be. Now we couldn't tell exactly what. We've got aluminum that can be from usually the pistons, but you can also get it from the case itself or the housing. You've got iron, a whole host of steel parts it can come from, along with copper, usually from bushings. So we couldn't pinpoint exactly what was wrong, but it was pretty clear that something was. And yeah, so he did investigate what was going on here and discovered that a crankshaft thrust bearing had failed. Major heat signature on the crank journal as well, and he was going to rebuild the engine. And because he saw, the warning signs of it before the engine blew up on him, grenaded, and he was stuck on the side of the road, he might have been able to salvage some other parts, like the cylinder assemblies, maybe still okay. So we helped him discover that problem, even though we couldn't pinpoint exactly what it was. He could upon further investigation, and so that's a real success story.
Yeah, certainly helps when you have a dedicated maintenance plan, which there's nothing more dedicated than 23 samples in an average file.
Yeah.
It gives us so much to lean on, and the owner as well. And it brings to mind a situation I had recently where I looked at a sample where I came to find out afterwards, first off, horrendous amount of metal. And I came to find out afterwards that the customer knew that some of the engine was going to be done for, at least the cylinders, but he wanted to know if the bearings were still okay. And the bearings did look okay. So even if you are in a situation where you have a problem, if you're in a position where you can repurpose parts, or if you want to sell parts, or whatever the case may be, just because there is a problem doesn't mean that the engine is as a whole junked. You can still salvage parts, you can still make something of it, depending on what your situation is.
Right. And depending on the situation, maybe the best course forward is to just get rid of that engine, replace it.
Yeah, we will be your engine's love doctor and let you know if you need to break that relationship, no matter what. So I want to look at another situation you had queued up here. We're talking about finding a problem, correcting a problem. So take us through this second example. Looks like we have a GM motor. So what do you got for us on this one?
Yeah, we've got a 2.5 liter from a Cutlass.
Okay.
1986. So this one's been on the road a while. It also had roughly 130,000 miles on it at the time of sampling.
Yep.
And that's since 1986, so, probably had some downtime in its life.
Certainly, yeah.
Also looked like the head gasket was starting to leak. And that first sample had quite a bit of the coolant markers. Then also some high wear, probably related. Second sample looked better, but probably just because the oil wasn't run very long. And it was after that he decided to look into things. It's like, sure, it looks better, but we told him that looks can be deceiving,
right?
Since the lower mileage. And instead of leaking head gasket, he found a crack in the cylinder head.
Okay.
Where coolant was getting in that way. And so he was grateful that we helped him know that there is a problem and get it resolved. However, it's still not looking great after that. So I'll be curious to see what the next sample shows, if maybe he should have replaced the head gasket while he was in there doing the cylinder head thing.
Yeah, it truly, the latest sample is in a state where it could go either way. The oil was run long enough to get some meaningful insight there, but certainly enough contamination that what's lingering could be impacting the way the engine is wearing. So yeah, that's an interesting one to follow up on. I hope we do see another sample from that one. But yeah, that goes out to any customer who has a motor that say there is a common concern. It may very well be what's going on, but often it takes a close inspection. If you have, just say, coolant, crack in the cylinder head, blown head gasket, there's more than one way for coolant to show up. So you want to rely on the results to find the contaminant, but then you also want to take the extra step of inspection before you make any hard and fast calls. So
That's right. Oil analysis is only one of many diagnostic tools.
yes.
And we've got a whole toolbox to use.
And I think we got one more here, Brian. Looks like
Do
we
we?
have a example on the industrial side.
Ah,
So it looks like you have an interesting situation with a transfer case here from a Jeep. So what was the story on this one?
yeah. So this was a pretty routine sample. Well, the first one of these anyway. But with this situation, they just wanted to get a real good read on water with the Carl Fisher method, which is how we can pinpoint like parts per million rather than just a rough estimate with insolubles and flashpoint test. Really pinpoint it with that Carl Fisher. And this customer will do that in certain situations. In this situation, they were expecting the oil to be pretty dry, about as dry as it can be, and it was not.
Yeah.
So that got them scratching their heads and thinking that maybe the bulk oil that sample came from was contaminated. And to test that theory, they sent in 5 more samples of that oil itself just for that Carl Fisher test. And turns out water was found in all 5. And because of that, they'd never really followed up with me, telling me what they did about it.
They probably followed up with the bulk supplier, though.
They probably did. And they might have also recalled some units to get new oil before they were put into service.
Yeah. So that goes out to anyone wondering about water testing in particular. So we can obtain a rough percentage, but through the Carl Fisher method that Brian mentioned, we can also look at parts per million if you are in a situation where you need parts per million.
Yeah, and I also want to throw another disclaimer in there that there are some other factors that can interfere with that Carl Fisher test. Like any other test method, it is not perfect. And in most applications, more basic tests, the ones we do at standard are more than enough for you.
Yeah. Standard analysis, I remember a couple of years ago saying that it is standard in name only. It's actually pretty thorough and covers the bases. So I think some people hear the word standard and they think that this is a base package that needs to be added to. It's certainly enough to get the job done when you're looking for how a system or an engine is wearing and if there's contamination, so on.
Yeah, that just gave me the idea that maybe we should remarket that. Maybe
Perhaps.
call it the deluxe package.
Treat it like a car wash. This has everything you need to be looking and feeling good. No, but Brian, we went through a whole lot today. I certainly came away from this episode knowing more about you than I did before, and it was very fun chopping it up, both about your background and just how we go about this crazy thing known as oil analysis. So thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks again for having me on. It's been a pleasure. Always love to talk about myself.
All right, how good was that? Brian, senior analyst, also a man who was almost forced into an arranged marriage in Michoacan. Now, that was really interesting. I enjoyed learning so much more about Brian. Also, he brought really interesting report examples to the table. If you want to know exactly the data we were talking about, then you can go to our social media, specifically our Instagram page. We're going to have screenshots of those reports so you can review while you listen along. And lastly, do not forget to rate and review. It helps us tremendously. If you enjoy what you've been hearing on this show, then why not spread the word to more people? Why not have more folks find out about Slick Talk? And one easy way you can do that is by helping us grow our platform. You can do that by dropping a rating, a review. Let us know what you think about this episode. This is Blackstone Joe, signing off.